Okay, 7th grade, this is random samples. This is the very first page of our new packet. And you can see I'm helping myself out because I put down today's date, 4/28. And yeah, so I don't know if some of you tried to get on or didn't try to get on. I did host a Zoom today from 10 until 11, and I'll do one again later this week and send out another invite. I saw a couple people and Demarge for just a brief second. So Demarge, if you listen, I saw you, but then you were gone. So better luck next time. We can still try again. All right, so random samples. So a sample is a part of a larger population. Samples are used a lot by scientists, especially if you think about today with the coronavirus. Samples are really important. We have all these different people saying, hey, yeah, I used this and it made me feel better, or I used, this other thing and it made me feel better. And we decide to say that that is the cure-all. All right, so sorry about that. The phone was ringing. Anyway, like I was saying, samples are being used a lot right now with the coronavirus. And one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that we need a really large sample of people for anything to have worked well on, because if one person is able to use something and it worked for them, it does not necessarily mean it will work for anybody else or it will work for a large portion of the population. So samples are super important, really important to scientists especially, and that's just one example. So for samples to be random, all outcomes must be equally likely. So it would be if you were to stick your hand into a bag of M&Ms and you knew that each color was equally represented in that bag, that would be a random sample, because that means you have an equal chance of pulling out any color. The sample must be completely random. You can't choose it with any bias. You can't say, well, I am going to look for the brown ones, so I stick my hand in there, because that's not a random sample. Then you're pulling what you want. The sample has to be big enough to be representative of the entire population, and that's where the scientist thing comes in. It has to represent the entire population of people who suffer from this virus. And then there are many methods for picking a random sample. You can do it lots of different ways. Oftentimes they're just randomly generated by a computer. That is one way of getting the information that you need. So let's get started here. If I can figure out where I put my, duh, it's right in front of me. What am I talking about? All right, so here we go. Let's see what we can do. It gets a little confusing, which is why I try to get them written down, and then I may use this again to go back when I do the next page. Okay, so what kinds of methods can you use to get a random sample? So we're going to just think of at least 3. One thing you can do is you can pull cards from a deck. And maybe the card represents something, all right, because we have 4 of each type of card in there, so that's equally likely of happening. One way is to use, excuse me, a random number generator. Like a computerized type deal where the number just gets generated totally randomly. Okay, and a third way might be to flip coins. Okay, all right, so 2 examples of non-random sampling would be, one might be picking the first 2 people in line, or only surveying girls, or only surveying boys. Okay, those are not random because the first two people in line, nobody has it's not equally likely that these people will represent everybody, and it's not equally likely that you're getting a totally random sample because you're choosing two people as opposed to closing your eyes and choosing two people. You're picking the first two that you see. I don't know, that's a hard one to explain. But only surveying girls doesn't give you a very wide description of what's going on either. Okay, so the size of a population, the larger the size, the larger the sample is needed. So if you have a huge population, you're going to need a huge sample size to make sure that you get an equal representation of everybody. Okay. All right, and number 4, how do you know if a sampling method is random? If all outcomes are equally likely. And so 1, so that goes back to the M&M example. And 2, if all members of the population have an equally likely chance of selection. So I just shortened it up for us. So if all of the outcomes are equally likely, and if all members of the population have an equal ability to be chosen, then we know that it is truly a random sample. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at some of these. So these are going to be, not super easy, but we're going to go through some of them, and let's see if you can do, there's 4 on here, so I'm going to do the first 2, and let's see if you guys can get the other to think about. How about if I do 1 and 3? That's probably a good idea. Let's see if we can pick this up. Oh, dear me. There we go. Okay. Oh, all right. So Marco asked 10 students in his math class about their favorite candy. Is this a random sample? Well, it depends on how big the class is, and it depends on how he chose the people he asked. So if it's a small class, then 10 is going to be enough. But if it's not, then that's too little. Okay, so I'm going to say, first of all, 1, depends on, oops, I can't really see here. Oops. The size of the class. And then 2, it depends on the method of selection. Okay. Let's take a look at number 3. Okay, so all 7th graders are assigned a number. 100 numbers are pulled from a random number generator to identify students for a survey. Is this a random sample? What do we think? Yeah, everyone in the 7th grade has an equal chance of being chosen, so yes. right. Awesome. Okay, so you guys are going to take a look at numbers 2 and 4. So number 2 says the vice principal asked the first 45 students to arrive at school about their method of transportation. Is this random? And number 4, if you want to figure out how 7th graders feel about math, how could you get a random sample? I think you guys could do those. All right. Good luck.